Hello, class. I'm your instructor, Paul DiStefano, for this term, and I'd like to give you a quick tutorial on the concepts of the Milestone 1 assignment. I'll try my best to use analogous information, so I'm not actually giving you the exact answers, but I'll explain the concepts as best I can. I hope you're having a great week, and please use this tutorial to try to work through the assignment step by step without getting too overwhelmed if you look at the whole amount of work that's required. So I'll switch screens now over to the QSO-320 course menu, just in case you haven't found the actual spreadsheet that has the data on it. We'll go down here to Module 3 for Week 3. We'll go into Milestone 1, Organizational Sales. In the guidelines and rubric right here, you will see the Milestone 1 guidelines and rubric. So we scroll down and it gives all the directions and steps for completing this assignment, but in my opinion you're better off going into the Excel spreadsheet, what to submit data set right here, and working through the step-by-step procedure that's in that spreadsheet. It's consistent with the guidelines, so you'll have the work done correctly, but you'll just see that step-by-step creating tabs is way easier to do that way. So once you click on it, you'll want to download it, and of course it'll show up in your download files. It's scanning right now on my computer, but it'll be in the download history, and you'll see Open XLS datasheet for case study datasheet. And here it is right here. I have it open on another screen that I'm going to use instead right here. So it's basically that same file. So in the Excel spreadsheet that I downloaded and then clicked edit, so I can actually edit information. If you go to the tab M1A to E, it has exactly the instructions A, B, C, D steps that you'll want to perform one by one. And the first thing it says is drawing upon the data in the data tab, which is right here. And this has all the distribution centers, pallets, total cases of red, white, and organic that they ship. It says create a pivot table from that data and a pie chart that shows the total percentage of wine bought by each distributor. Pivot table and pie chart will populate on a new tab, and then you'll need to rename that new tab M1A. And then state the rationale you use to create the table and pie chart, which is important in case you don't do it correctly. I'll see what your methodology was from a partial credit standpoint to see where you went wrong. So to do that, of course, and again, I have to show you as much as I can without actually just giving you the answer, a data table, you highlight this whole section of all the distribution centers and all the weeks that the wine is sent to each distribution center. I'm getting to week 52 here. And you would go into insert. And I always use recommended pivot tables. Even if it doesn't give you the exact format you want, it's giving you something very close that you can tweak. So recommended pivot tables, and you'll see it has row labels, and some of cases red, some white, some of cases organic. But it doesn't sum all of the cases by distributor. It's using each type of wine to each distributor. So I'll just pick one I think is close to what I want. So I'll do that one right there. I'll press OK. You'll see that it gives me exactly what I asked for. How many cases are sent to each distributor for the whole year of red. But as you know, we wanted total cases each distributor. So this is just generically what I'm saying is that if you pick the closest pivot table to what you want, and then you come over to the pivot table fields and say, well, that's not quite what I wanted, so I'm going to edit it. So instead of using total cases, I'm going to use, or cases of red, I could have selected it this way and it would give me columns for each one. Could select week of order, some of the weeks of order, but what I really wanted was total cases to each distributor. And bam, there it is. It gives. So now what I did was I double clicked on the sum of total cases. Let me do that again because I jumped ahead. Sum of total cases. And it'll bring up a screen for value field settings. I want to say show value as, and the question asks for percentages of the grand total, not total number of cases. So I say show value as percent of grand total. And what I get is these percentages. 26% goes to Oakland, pretty evenly distributed. Portland's a little lower, and that totals 100%. So that's basically how to do part of the first section of the first question. And of course, what I do now is double click on sheet 3 and name it M1A as the instructions said. So when you submit your work, I'll be able to tell what answer is on which tab. So now I go back to the M1A to E to see the instructions for what's asking me to do next. And it's saying create a pie chart of this same data. So that's still part of M1A. So I'll come over to M1A where the data is. And once you get used to this, it becomes very simple. You highlight the data, you say insert, and you look for pie charts, and you say, I just want a normal 2D pie chart, and bam, it creates it for you, and it shows you in pie chart format, and you can see they're almost all equal size. Portland is just a slightly smaller at 21%. So that's basically how to do the pivot table and pie chart for question A of this assignment. Okay, now for question B, it says using a pivot table, show wine distribution by variety and distributor and provide a bar chart, and we'll call that M1B. So essentially, we could use this same chart and change the pivot fields, but then you wouldn't be able to show the answer to the question A. So we're going to go back to the data, highlight it all as we had before. We're going to say insert pivot table, recommended format, say yes, it'll create another sheet. We'll call that, double click on it, M1B, and then we'll look at that pivot table and we'll say we want to know now which type of case of wine went to each distributor. So we are going to say cases of red, white, and organic so that we see all of them, and we can do a bar chart for each distributor for each type of wine as the question asked. So let's throw in the grand total also in case we need that data, total cases. So now to do the bar chart to show total cases sent to each distributor of each type of wine, we would highlight this table right here and we would say insert, and we would go to the bar chart table, down arrow for the different types. We want a 2D column. Click on that and there you get, and it shows to Oakland, red, white, and organic. Organic's drastically lower than everything else. And then it shows the total to each distribution center. So that essentially answers question B. You notice what we're just doing is using a pivot table and selecting what data we want to show, and then taking the data we want to show and selecting a graphical visualization of a pie chart or a bar chart. That's essentially what question B is asking for. So now going back to the original question, M1A to E, you'll see C says create a new tab, M1C, and the table and bar chart to show revenue by distributor and wine variety. Now there are multiple ways to do that, of course, and since you're looking at revenue here, first thing you're going to want to see is how much each case of each type of wine costs. So you're going to go over to the costs and distances table, and you'll see here the wholesale price, which is what is being charged to the distributor, is $7.50, $8.50, $12 per bottle, and then for cases $45, $48. And organic is $72. So from a revenue standpoint, they are charging the wholesale price to the distributor. So what you will need to do without me actually doing it, I'll go back to M1B, and this is showing the some of the cases, red, white, and organic. You'll want to double click on this. Right click on it. As you know, I'm doing this real time, so I'm kind of also figuring it out as we go. So you'll want to copy that spreadsheet to M1B is the before sheet. Create a copy, and you'll see M1B2. Double click on that, name it M1C. I'm doing this so I don't have to recreate the pivot table. And in an M1C, I can get rid of this table, so I just have the bar chart, and I just have the sum of the cases. And you'll see that if I create another table below this, I can either do it as a reference. Can't do it as a pivot table quite, because the cost per case is not in the data table, but I can do it as get pivot data, which is another method. But I will say that if you look up the get pivot data formula, it'll refer back to the data tab. But there's also, to me, an easier way, since this already refers to the data tab, is just take each one of these cells, create another table, and multiply it times the cost of a case of red, white, organic, and you can see how much, as a result, how much revenue goes to Oakland, for instance, with multiplying that times the case cost of red, cost of white, cost of organic. You essentially add that up, and you're going to have total revenue that you're getting. I said goes to, but actual revenue you're getting from Oakland, California. And if you do the same thing for Portland, you'll see what revenue you're getting from Portland. And then using that data, you can basically do the same type of bar chart I did previously. Hope that helps without actually going through the exact answer. But what I would do is I would put the costs for each type here, and then create another table and just do at that cell times the cost, and then at that cell times the cost, at that cell times the cost, and then basically do a bar chart of the resulting table. Let me know if that's confusing. I'm sure you can all figure that out. If you use the get pivot data method, it'll be a little more complicated, but you should get to the same answer. So what I'm essentially saying to do is to create another table, copy this down below, put what the cost is for a case of red. Say it was 48. I won't use the real number. And the white was 35, and the organic is 73, say, dollars. I always like to put units, because otherwise it gets confusing as to what you're multiplying. Let's do it in dollars and cents. And then when you do Oakland, California, you would say plus that cell times that cell. And if you notice, you'll get $48 times 123,000. And if you look at what formula it created, it did the get pivot data calculation for you. And then you would do the same thing for Portland by saying, I want to take that number of cases times asterisk $48 times that cell, and it's going to get me that number. These numbers aren't correct, remember, because I just made up these their wholesale price per case numbers, so don't go using the exact numbers and coming up with the sample answer rather than the real answer. So of course you would do that for all the cells, including the total, and then you would highlight this and do the same thing with inserting a bar chart once all the data is populated. And you'll see how much revenue is coming from each distributor versus how many cases. And that basically helps you with M1C. So now look at question D, which is the central tendencies of the shipments to each distributor in terms of cases. And it created a table here for you. So they want the mean pallet number, the median pallet numbers, and the mode pallet numbers. So if you look at the data table, you're essentially saying for Oakland, in week 1 it was 48, in week another shipment of 28 for Oakland, another 28 here. So what's the mean number of pallets shipped? So you're going to do an average if statement, and using an average if, you have to basically select that you want it to be based on column B, but only picking out each of the distributors. So it's a sum. It's an average if for this equaling Oakland, and then you're going to add up all the pallet count for B, and it's going to do an average if calculation for you. Play with it a while and you'll see what it's essentially trying to do. That's about it for that question. Of course, then you'll want to do the median if and the mode if the same way, by basically the if is if it equals Oakland, and then you add up whatever is in this column for pallet count. So now on question E, we're analyzing the frequency of the size of shipments to each distributor using a histogram, and we're going to use the following bin sizes, because in all cases, in all situations, I should say, not use the word cases, we send either 72 pallets or bins, 48 pallets, 24, 18. These are the these are the bin sizes that we ship to each distributor, depending on what the demand is and the frequency. So the question is asking for a histogram on how often we send each of these bin sizes. So if you go back to the data, so I'm back at the data tab, and I'm looking at column B for the number of times 72 pallets, 48, 24 here have been sent as a total to the distributors. So what I want to do is to create a new tab called M1E for module 1 or milestone 1 question E. I want to go back to the data, and I want to copy these pallet bin sizes over to M1E. But I want them in reverse order, because you'll see when I do my histogram, I really want to go from lowest to highest. So I'm just going to manually reverse the order. Probably an easy way to do that, but do what you got to do. Okay. So there it is. I get rid of that. And now I want to find out the frequency. How often these bin sizes, which is how many pallets are sent, occurs. So I want to get that from the data tab, from these columns. So what I'm going to do is use a count statement, count if s. And what it's going to do is first click in that area and it says the range of cells you want to evaluate for a particular condition. So I go to the data and I want to evaluate that whole column for that condition. Is the condition that I'm looking for, and it's going to be a 1 for a bin count of 1. That appears in that column. It says there are 47 that are a 1. Then I want to do it for how many there are a 3. So in order to copy this down, I can't let it, data is going to have to be $B, so it doesn't make it an absolute instead of a relative. So it stays that way all the way down, and they're all 47s. So in this one, I'm going to change that. That's looking for a 3. And I'm going to change it to look for a 6. And then a 12. And then an 18. Then a 24. And then 48, and then a 72. So it automatically went back to the data tab and used a count if to count how many cells had met that condition that had that number in column B, and told me how many that was. So now I just need to do a histogram of that. So I will highlight these cells. I'll say insert recommended charts frequency. All charts histogram would have also worked, but recommended charts is easier because it saw that it had frequency, so it was a histogram. And I generate it, and it tells me how many times I've sent those bin sizes, and you can see I've sent 24 bin sizes, the most of any of the other bin sizes. So that's how you can automatically pull that data from here using the count if. On M1F, it asks you to do it for only 2 of the distributors. But interestingly enough, if you copy this and do a histogram for each of those 2, interestingly enough, if you copy this and you go back to this count if statement, I'll show you something interesting, is that you can do that by doing exactly what I did here, but then also using a criteria range 2, which is going to go into the data, and it's going to be A, column A. And what I'm going to look for is a certain distributor, say Riverside, California. And it's going to tell me Riverside, California now met the condition of having a 1 in column B wherever column A had Riverside, California. And if I drag that down, which I can't technically do without making that absolute instead of relative, and then pull that down, so now that I've copied it and they all say 12, and of course they all say 12 because they're all looking for how many times a 1 appears in Riverside, California. So in this one I would change that criteria to a 3. and then to 6, which is 0, interestingly enough. We never see a 6 appear anywhere, which means it's not really a valid bin size. So I'll do this for a 12. I'll do this for a 24. And then a 48. And then a 72. And then, of course, I could highlight that, insert histogram for just Riverside, California, which I should obviously change the title up here so we know what we just created. And that is basically how that is done using the COUNTIF statement rather than using a data sort. The data sort is not difficult because it would say Riverside, California. You just give an example. Riverside, California, 24 was 43 frequency. So Riverside, California, 24 was 43. If you look down here, you see 43. If you just do it by the data sort methodology, which works also, but I like the formula, so if you change anything, it'll always carry through. So that is basically how to do this exercise, this assignment. So please go through it step by step and pause as you go to actually try some things out and make sure you understand it, because I went through it in pretty quick time here. And then contact me if you have any problems, if there are any specific questions or clarifications you need that I confused you on something. I'll certainly be willing to clarify that. So just get a hold of me and I will do that. And if there's additional information you need, something I didn't cover, I'd be glad to cover that also. So thanks, class. Have a great week and good luck with this assignment.